Working Cows Podcast, episode 387. This episode is brought to you by the South Dakota Grassland Coalition. This episode is also brought to you by Ranch Right.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Hi, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag Studios. And this episode is brought to you by the South Dakota Grassland Coalition. We told you all summer about the South Dakota Grassland Coalition's great grazing schools. Well, maybe the schedule didn't quite work, but they've got another opportunity for you. A 3-day school, November 19th through the 21st, with Josh and Tara Ducart from Seek First Ranch. They are going to be educating and teaching the holistic management course. They're certified educators through Holistic Management International, and they are teaching a 3-day course, again, November 19th through the 21st, from 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. All of those days, lunch is included. It's a $1,000 school, but the South Dakota Grassland Coalition is covering $850 per person is contributed. So class size is limited, so be one of the first 25 to register to guarantee your spot, and you can do that at sdgrass.org. So get ready for the Regenerate 3-day school, land, relationships, and wealth with Josh and Tara Ducart of Seek First Ranch in North Dakota, and you can take part in that by going to sdgrass.org or check out the show notes page for today. Very excited to be joined today by Shanon Sims. I was having a conversation with Dallas Mount about the improvements that he's seen on his operation for some Patreon exclusive bonus content. And I asked him during that bonus content, I said, what does it mean when you see certain species of grass, specifically in my case, cheatgrass growing at your place? Do you get worried about that? If you can't point to any, particular management failure, do you concern yourself with that very much? He says, I don't really, but the best person, the most grass nerdy person I know that you should ask that question of is Shanon Sims. So here we are today. Shanon Sims is my guest once again on the Working Cows Podcast. We're going to talk to him about the benefits of being a grass nerd. So Shanon, thanks for joining me today again on the Working Cows Podcast. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Clay. It's always fun.
Always a pleasure to have you. And Dallas, I had him on a couple of months ago, and in the course of that bonus content recording, we were talking about kind of the changes he's seen in his operation over the years of implementing his management style. And I asked him a question, and I'm going to play that question for you now. And he asked me that I make sure that I include his response to this question in the publicly available section because it pertained to you. And I told him I would, and I failed to do that. And now I'm a man of my word. I'm keeping my word to Dallas. I'm going to play it for the whole world to hear and let you listen, and then we'll talk about your response to it. So here we go.
Well, it's nice to know that even Clay has problems. So.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that was my other question is, when I was there with you in Rapid City, you said this is the one day a year it goes right. I felt very seen at that moment. But so last couple of years, we've had very easy open winters. This year, probably the best early spring moisture we've had since we've been here. We've been here for about 5 years, and then tapered off a little bit in the later spring for moisture. Hasn't been as good, but still a pretty good spring. Then last year we had real late spring moisture and a lot of it. And both of the times, I'm wondering if that easy winter hasn't contributed to the increased population of cheatgrass in our neighborhood. And I've asked somebody else about it, and I'm curious what your answer would be. I don't think I've mismanage the grazing bad enough to see this much cheatgrass, but have you ever run into that kind of a thing, seeing cheatgrass where you don't think it should be?
I'm probably the wrong guy to ask about that. I probably don't pay attention to the details like that as much as I should.
Right.
Shanon Sims probably has the merit badge for being the grassiest, nerdiest person I know.
Okay.
So, make sure that comment makes the public website, if you would. And
that's going to go in as an Easter egg at the end. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I failed to include it as an Easter egg, but there it is in all its glory. And so I wanted to use that as a jumping off point to ask you that same question. Do you think that kind of the moisture pattern when it comes, the openness or the coveredness of the winter plays some role in the different plant populations that express themselves from year to year in conjunction with our management, eclipsing our management? What are some of those, your thoughts on those things?
First thing, Clay, I think Dallas was more interested in calling me a nerd than he was interested in actually acknowledging any kind of expertise I might have, because I don't. I don't have that kind of expertise. All I have is a lot of observation, and I think the easy answer, just the short answer to your question about how weather influences plant populations is yes, absolutely. And it's going to be different from our management. Our management can only influence, what's out on the landscape. We like to believe that we have control. And so we end up trying to control nature, and all we can do is influence nature. And so with cheatgrass, I've seen exactly what you're talking about, where we have a nice open winter, and that results in an early spring, where we're actually getting some of that early April snow to go in the ground because we've thawed out earlier. And the cheatgrass, man, boom, here it is. And it's ahead of the western wheatgrass. It's ahead of the sagewort. And that's all you can see, And then instead of being the 1st of June and it's a red, ugly mass out there, it's, the end of May and it's a red, ugly mass out there. And you're scratching your head wondering, what did I do? Because as managers, and it's not true of every manager, but I think the people that are listening to your program, as managers, we take responsibility for that, as we should, and ask, what can we do different? But I do think that we still have to be in awe and respect. There's powers way beyond us. And it's not just cheatgrass. I was talking to my brother-in-law just the other day about yellow sweet clover, and I'm assuming clover is also a bane in South Dakota where you are. Kellen Smith has a really great song about cheatgrass and clover, right? They go together.
The only good thing about sweet clover this year was that it gave the grasshoppers something to eat other than the grass. They stripped every leaf off of the sweet clover, and then we hit 108 for 3 days in a row, and there was no more grasshoppers after that either. So I don't know what happened, but that was my observation.
So is this like the clover version of calving in sync with nature to eliminate predator losses?
Yeah, for sure.
If you have enough clover out there to distract your insects, then they'll leave your grass alone. You might be onto something there, man. I think we just solved a huge problem. Whenever we see sweet clover, it's because we had a really wet fall. And if we see lots of sweet clover, we also see a lot of alsite clover and red clover down in the hay meadows. Can't even start. I didn't make that observation the first time. One of my good friends, Todd Heward, his grandfather made that observation, and then it's been shared down through his generations, and then he shared it with me, and you start, you learn something and you start looking for it, and sure enough, there it is. Yeah. And yellow sweet clover with cheatgrass. It's not a terrible combination, like 24% crude protein in that sweet clover, and fill their belly with the cheatgrass, and maybe it's not a terrible thing if we can control our grazing just a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a big part of it is not seeking to control everything. The common response is to throw an input at it in a lot of cases, right? I mean, we go out, we mow, we spray, we, do something to control that. Whereas if we just take that step back approach and say, this is what I've been given this year, let's make the most of it. Is that kind of the mindset that you would approach that with?
Yeah, it is. And just to expand on that a little bit, what are those plants telling us? Um, Along I-80 in McFadden to Elk Mountain, we've got a spotted knapweed problem. And we've worked with County Weed and Pest. We've airily sprayed. We've done broad swaths of spray. We've hand sprayed, spot sprayed. We brought in Lonnie Malmberg and her goats. We've done some adaptive grazing with our own cattle. And when I say we, I'm talking about the whole valley here participates in this. And what we now know is number one, spotted knapweed is actually a forage that the cows love once they know they can eat it. And number two, that it is a first responder whenever we have a negative impact. And generally, the impact that it's trying to address is erosion. And so along I-80, everywhere that they, cut away a hill or added material to fill in a draw, you've got these places where it's easy for the soil to move. And man, here comes a spotted knapweed. And then it's moved down into our pastures as well. But when we look at those pastures, there's places where it does not grow, and there's places where it does grow. Our job is to decipher, why is it growing there? What can we do to address it? And then which is the right tool to address it? And sometimes the right tool, geez, maybe I shouldn't say this publicly, but I will. Sometimes the right tool is not to worry about it, because we are never going to be without spotted knapweed again. It will never be. I think the first spotted knapweed observed was about 1983. It'll never be 1982 again. There will always be this plant here. And so where is it appropriate? How do we use it to our advantage? And what is it telling us?
Yeah. Well, and you're in country where the cows are rightfully jumpy about what weeds they eat, right? I mean, there's probably larkspur somewhere in the neighborhood that they're trying to avoid. I mean, or at least, in that part of the world, I know of people who are dealing with that. And so they're thinking, maybe I should lay off of that until they figure out, oh, this is good and it feels good when I eat it. I'm going to eat more of that, right?
Partially right. And I'm going to say partially because you brought up larkspur in particular, and there are places that have serious larkspur issues, and this was one of them. In 1989, my dad Scott and my uncle Olin went to Savory's grazing school, holistic resource management back then, and learned a lot about grazing and learned a lot about the feedback loop, that is the Savory system framework for decision making. And they applied those two things. And there's a stretch of Coal Bank Creek that runs through our property. And Dad, I don't remember it this way, but I'm only 45. I'm still just kind of a little wet behind the ears. But Dad talks about when that stretch, and it's about 1,200 acres, was just purple. And he talks about riding across there, trying to treat cattle for larkspur poisoning and all the different methods that they used, which sometimes included a can of Copenhagen. And I'm not sure if that was for the cattle or for him or for both. I think it was both. And then after the school, they went in and they started putting in some fence and broke that 1,200 acre patch up into half section pastures, so 300 acres. And I don't know what possessed them to do it, if they were just that trusting of Savory and what he was teaching, if they're about half crazy, or just completely unaware of how bad the consequences could be. But 300 head of cattle into one of those pastures that was just purple for 3 days and never lost an animal, because every animal got a little bit, but no animal got too much. And then I think they were aware of what could happen, and they moved into a clean pasture next, allowed that toxicity to pass through the cow. And it only took like 2 or 3 years, and those pastures were no longer purple. Flash forward to about 2015, and no, it's more like 2008. One of the extension personnel from the University of Wyoming was wanting to write a pamphlet about larkspur, kind of knew our experiences, and so came out and met with us. And I actually end up as one of the authors on the pamphlet, which was kind of funny because I'm not really an author, but we went out and looked at this spot. What I wasn't seeing that his trained eye could see is that pasture is still full of larkspur, but it's never allowed to mature to the point of bloom. So it's never been a toxic problem since. Now it's contributing to the diversity of our pasture and become a forage resource rather than a liability. And so back to your original question, yes, cattle can be taught to avoid certain plants. Usually that behavior originates from a poor job on our part of teaching them how to utilize resource poorly, right? It's a little bit embarrassing. Our cows are garbage guts now. They eat spotted knapweed, they eat larkspur, they eat white top, they eat everything except for hound's tongue and black henbane, and I'm working on it. How's that? But yeah, I mean, any of these, there's plants, arrowgrass, any kind of arrowgrass is going to do them in. We can also take care of arrowgrass with trampling.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of those things you named off, we call them weeds. They're also known as forbs, and they contain a lot of compounds and different flavor profiles that probably contribute, and I'm saying probably because I don't know, contribute on some level to managing some parasite that they're dealing with out there as well. I mean, they're there for a reason. They play a role if we have the humility to let them be there and also not force our cattle to eat them when they shouldn't or eat too much of them. We can avoid a lot of the toxicity issues as well. And maybe you can fill in some of the gaps in what I said there with your experience, but that's kind of my understanding of it anyways.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, you're getting into Fred Provenza stuff. And so when I have to start talking about Provenza's work, I get really head shy because he's brilliant and I ranch in McFadden. So no comparison. And I'm going to get in over my head and say something wrong. We'll just put that out there right now. But if a cow goes out and she's on a pasture she's going to eat the grass first. She's going to eat the best feed first. And then if we leave her too long, she has to go eat something else. And so she's going to go pick that larkspur, right? And then she gets a taste for it. It's addictive. It's kind of like me and coffee. If I have a little bit, I'm going to have a little bit more, right? And pretty soon we have a toxicity. If we turn those cows out there and we give them plenty of room, we can avoid that larkspur because they're doing more what you're talking about. Maybe they're nibbling at that larkspur to address something wrong in the system. Maybe they have a parasite. Maybe they need a little additional protein. Maybe there's something wrong, but then they have grass to go back to. But it's really our management that typically drives a toxicity, a behavior that's detrimental to the animal.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, Ranch Right. Shipping, preg checking, fall calving, the list goes on and on. Fall is always a busy time on the ranch, and yours is no different. It's easy to let the business side of your business fall to the bottom of the list this time of year. Visit ranchrightllc.com today and let them take your business from surviving to thriving. After all, you've got a ton to do. So wouldn't it be nice to have a team to help? Visit ranchrightllc.com and let them make your business run a little bit smoother. So kind of back to where we started as far as the issue of being a grass nerd. What have been some of the ways that you've gone about educating yourself on different species and their role and what they're indicating? I appreciated what you said about spotted knapweed. I've heard weeds called nature's cover crop. Now I hear you say they're a first responder, right? They're there after the disturbance has happened and they're there to kind of try and help cover that soil and make things better. So what have been some of the ways that you've gone about educating yourself on these species?
Oh, I love this question because it allows me to teach something I just learned. Okay. The easy answer is when I was either a junior or senior in high school, um, our conservation district was pretty progressive and they brought in Miles Keogh to teach holistic resource management. And my parents went to the school, to Medicine Bow High School, where I was at, and asked that I take a week out of school and attend that training. And I think the teachers were, yeah, we can take a week off from him asking a bunch of stupid questions and his sarcasm. We're all in. And so they allowed me to go to that training and then basketball practice in the afternoon. And like I was living my best life for a week, right? Got to talk about the things I loved, plants, animals, and basketball. So it was a great week for me. And that started it, right? I mean, I guess really back up a little bit. I was born into holistic management. Um, I was born in 1979. Dad Nolan went in 1989, so not literally born into it, but my formative years, a lot of those principles were already being applied here, and so it's kind of it's my paradigm, is what it is. And then I guess when you have that paradigm, you just constantly continue to seek new knowledge. And it started with that first training. I did another training with Roland Cruz later in life. Went to the University of Wyoming as an animal science major because I loved animals, but I took a lot of range classes. So much of what I was learning in the range classes was, I don't want to say contradictory, but it was different than what I was learning from Alan Savory and Miles Keogh and what we were seeing here on the ranch. And sometimes what they were teaching me was actually better. And this is where I'm really glad you asked this question. The feedback loops. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm a huge fan of feedback loops. In the Ranching for Profit School, we use plan, monitor, manage, right? And what that means is we're going to develop a plan, implement that plan, monitor the results. And that's where I feel like so many people get it wrong is they plan, but they don't monitor the results. They just expect that it's going to work or they expect that it's not going to work, but they don't monitor the results. Once we have those results, then we have a choice to make. If the result was different than we expected in a good way, are we going to continue to implement it? And are we going to try to find a better way to do it? And once we do that, now we have some experience, right? And we can use that to go create a new plan. Or if it creates results that we didn't expect or that are negative, we can either just say that won't work here, or we can go ahead and experiment a little bit more and we can tweak and we can ask, why didn't that work here? And we can develop a new plan, right? What I just learned that I think is so much more valuable in explaining that to people who aren't in the school. Because when you're in the school, we're using that to describe how we handle our economics, and we're using that to describe how we handle our grazing principles, right? That's the first grazing principles: plan, monitor, manage. For somebody that's not been through the school, the CIA uses information, knowledge, and experience. And so information is somebody telling me you would make more money if you don't make hay. Okay. I can either say, I will never make hay again, implement that on my place, find a way around it, and assume that I'm now making more money. Or I can implement that practice, in our case, on a small scale, and I can monitor those results. Once I've analyzed those results, now I have knowledge. Now I know something. Okay. And that's where, again, I can say, now I know that won't work here, or now I know that will work here. But I don't really have any experience yet until I've played with that and I've tried to make it work better or go ahead and work. Now I have experience, and that experience leads me to ask new questions, which brings me to new information. And see how that flywheel just starts moving faster and faster and faster. And so the flywheel for me started with where I was born. I was very lucky. And then And then it also, I guess, started with where I was born, because when I got back to the ranch from school, I was not brought in as a manager, but I was allowed to make decisions and I was allowed to make big mistakes. And so I gained a lot of knowledge early on and a lot of experience. And then I was provided the guidelines to turn that knowledge and experience into additional information, yada, yada, yada. So that's probably where most of my I don't know, um, nerdiness comes from.
Yeah, well, and just that desire to continue to expand that, don't get stuck at one step of the process. Plan, monitor, manage, information, knowledge, experience. Like you said, people get stuck in one place and they don't get all of the benefits out of that experiment that they could. And I think so. How do you monitor? How do you like to monitor? What are some of the things that are worth monitoring? I think sometimes we pitch these monitoring systems that are too complex and people don't do them. So what kind of, when in that plan, monitor, manage, cycle, what are some of the things that you're monitoring?
Oh man. This is where I think I am a nerd. I'm a spreadsheet nerd more than a grass nerd. And so I monitor everything. But what allows me to monitor everything without burning out is I keep it as simple as possible. So I don't know if it is such a buzzword anymore, but you remember and I remember 10, 15 years ago, rangeland monitoring was a buzzword and everybody needed to be rangeland monitoring. Most people are using it more for CYA than they were for management implications, but we all need to be rangeland monitoring. And so let me just start there. Our rangeland monitoring amounts to 9 transects that we read 3 every third years, right? So only reading 3 transects over 26,000 acres, 3 transects every 3 years. Those 9 transects are in extremely representative locations. Okay. The way we read those is wintertime. We come back and we feed that into a program called Sample Point. The last I knew is still available through the BLM for free, a free download, and that allows us to take 1,000 covered by life form points and tells us what our forb component is, what our grass component is, or what our bare ground component is. And so monitoring that, if we're starting to see bare ground on an increase, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to monitor precip records, grazing records, and the general trend and adjust from there. When it comes to our finances, it's ranching for profit. And I don't want to sound like, too much of a fanboy, but I do help teach the school sometimes. And so, I mean, that's a really easy way to monitor your business is to use the economic planning process, right?
You're at least there while Melinda teaches it.
I am there as emotional support for the person with the experience.
No, but I do agree totally. The economic analysis that you come out of ranching for profit with is very useful and user friendly.
And to me, that tool is looking forward and backwards, right? Because what we did last year, why not? If it worked last year, let's try it again next year. So when we plug that in, really, we're kind of looking backwards, but we're also looking forward to see if that is going to work again this next year. So that's how I monitor that. I monitor my own health. I'm constantly on the scales and I'm constantly, it's real simple with the scales I've got. I'm measuring percent body fat and I'm measuring how I feel. And I don't know, I think once you start recognizing the power of observation, you start to observe everything. And once you start to observe everything, you feel a need to quantify it. And once you start quantifying it, then we can just sit there and it's, it's information or it's data, add a little bit of curiosity, and now we have some information, and then here we go again. We have knowledge.
Yeah, very good, and I appreciate that. And so this leads in a segue to another portion of this conversation. Your wife was on the Regenerative Legacy Summit. She gave a great talk. And when Jared Sorensen asked us to sum up what she had to say on that, I put in the chat, I said, don't be a zealot, do what works in your environment. Because I think it's really easy for us to get, and me especially, to become a zealot and say, none of this, none of that, all of this, all the time, rather than this is what works here. And you said, somebody might say, you can't make money and make hay, right? Well, that's not necessarily true at your ranch. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that, about how you go about deciding what are we going to do here, and some of those things. In a recent Facebook conversation, I think you put in there that Dallas has you as part of the team at Ranching for Profit because you calve in April, you make hay, and you don't rotate cattle multiple times per day. And so I guess that kind of goes to that point about not being a zealot and doing what works for your operation in your context. And so just talk to me a little bit about that.
You would think at 45 years old, I would learn that my sarcasm usually gets me in trouble and to back off of it. And I still haven't learned that. I think I like to challenge everything, right? And some of my best mentors, and they've become some of my best friends, are guys that will say, every time you put steel between a cow and the feed, you're going backwards. Our context is I can put steel between the cow and the feed, and I'm actually more economically viable by doing that. Because, Dave Pratt just had a great article that was reshared on Pasture, I believe, about opportunity costs. And so everything comes back to opportunity costs. It costs us $35 per AUM to run a cow here. So $35 per animal unit month. And that's pretty cheap. When we start working through those numbers, it costs us $93 per ton. That's what that $35 is worth. Okay, so we've already got $93 into it. The way we graze, and I can be challenged on this, but the way we graze, the harvest efficiency that we get grazing meadows versus haying them is about 85%. So factor that in, and now we're at $109 a ton to graze that feed. That feed in the middle of winter is 4.5% crude protein. If I run a mower across it, put it in a swath, it's 7 to 7.5% crude protein. So I don't need to add anything to it, but at 4.5, I better add something to it. Epigenetics only work with a live animal, right? And so I better be adding some protein to it. At $200 a ton protein, all of a sudden my cost for that $35 per AUM grass is $140 a ton. So I've saved myself $20 a ton with the windrow because it's only $119 per ton to make a windrow that I don't have to add anything to. My favorite argument that everybody comes back to is, well, you should be a seasonal operation. I can run numbers till I'm blue in the face. If somebody believes I should be a seasonal operation, I'm not going to change their mind, is what I've discovered. I cannot figure out how to put the same value on a seasonal animal as I can for a year-round animal. In our cow-calf operation, we make more money than bringing in a yearling and trying to add weight to him just because we have trouble putting weight on him. So that's the context here. And so, like I say, when Burke says that, he is probably right 99% of the time. And if I was somebody that's not such a smart aleck and not so self-assured, I might just go to a seasonal operation because I have so much respect for Burke. But I'm curious too. And I'm curious why some of these people around us have gone to yearlings and then went back to cows. I'm curious as to why my great granddad, Toby Holstead's quote, right? The most dangerous words in agriculture. This is how grandpa did it. The second most dangerous words in agriculture, not understanding why grandpa did it that way. So there's a lot of that just feeds back into these loops.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I always say that my love languages are coffee and sarcasm. So I think you're in good company here.
Sweet. That's how I ended up on here 3 times so far. We have the same love language.
Yeah, we're all the way back to episode 3 of the Working Cows podcast, talking about swath grazing again. So that's good, and windrow grazing. So that's good.
To be fair, that was Melinda,
right?
So that
correct.
was
because you were unloading a load of hay.
Because I was unloading a load of alfalfa.
I remember that,
so I could graze.
Good times. But this is also that. Your sarcastic comment was also something I wanted to discuss with you, because I think I actually heard Melinda say at one time that you guys were analyzing some information, trying to get some knowledge out of it, and moving your calving date out of May into April. Do I have that history right?
You do. And this is year 2 of that experiment. So I don't have a lot of data so far, to be honest with you.
I see.
But the reason we did that is you get to the end of the Ranching for Profit school, and I think most of your listeners probably are familiar with the balancing nature and that exercise we do at the end, where you plot out your grass growth curve, and our grass growth curve, we're starting to run out of protein about mid-August. Okay. And so for us, it's not a matter of matching it up perfectly. It's taking the edges off the ends. And it's cheaper for us to get more cows pregnant and then soften the other end with a little additional winter feeding. That 1 week does not make any difference nutritionally. It makes difference in availability of other feed. So it's really not costing us that much more. And if we have an early year, we feed less. If we have a later year, we're feeding the same amount anyway. And so it's really just about aligning on the back end and getting more cows pregnant. When we, back in the day when we were calving in March and April, it was nothing. If we got less than 92% conception rate, we're pretty defeated. That hurt like hell. Now, if we get 88% conception rates, we're pretty happy. But there's some years where we get 85 and things just get a little bit, you can still make money, but it just hurts a little bit, to watch these 3-year-olds that is a good cow. She just couldn't hit that year. And if we would have just turned the bulls in a week earlier before she started losing condition, because that's really what it comes down to, is that wilt-bag principle of a cow on the gain. Cow that's losing condition is not going to breed. And so we're playing with that. Last year, it seemed to work pretty good. Our conception rates, Melinda's the real nerd. She could tell you exactly what those rates were, and we'll see what it does this year. I'll let you know. The other thing that's interesting about that is come back full circle to your first comment about cheatgrass and clover and how does weather affect that. Melinda has a really cool chart of how precipitation plays into our conception rates. And so if it doesn't rain in July and August, we don't get cows bred. So backing that up a little bit, by that week is not much, but we generally, if we have a dry June, it's drought. I think you're the same way up there in South Dakota. We can count on some precip in May and June. July and August is a little bit more of a crapshoot. If we get good moisture in those 2 months, man, the cows breed up good. If they don't, we're hurting.
Yeah. That's a lot like our context as well. Yeah. So, I guess we'll end where we started, back on this idea of being a grass nerd, and talk about a little bit about kind of meshing it all together with where we've been for the last few minutes, about the idea of we don't want to get so wrapped around the axle about what's out there. We want to just manage for what we want and let the range express itself within reason. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think so. That's, you just laid down a lot of stuff right there. And so I'm trying to process through it, like, let the range express itself within reason. And I really struggle moving from rangeland down to our hay meadows because rangeland, the more natural we can keep that, the more profitable we are. I move down into the hay meadows, the more natural I keep that, it starts to cost me a bit of money. And so we have to look at everything as a whole. And there's holes within holes, right? And so any of these statements get very complicated to use a broad stroke. I'm going to get myself in trouble when I start talking about one because I'm doing the exact opposite, literally 10 feet away.
Mm. And it comes down to, being able to know, getting knowledge out of the information and experience backing up, yeah, this is the right thing to do, right? I mean, this is what makes this system work, is a little extra push here or there, depending on where we're at. If we're on the hay meadows, we're going to do something a little differently here because it fits into the whole, right?
I don't know if this helps kind of explain where we're at, Clay, or not, but Ernest Shackleton was on a quest to cross the Antarctic. What was that, like 1918? He was going to be the first to cross the Antarctic. He had a very clear vision of where he wanted to go. Got to help me out here because I can't remember the bay that they got into, but their ship became entrapped by ice. At that time, he had two options: go with the current vision and at all costs try to allow that to happen, try to cross the Antarctic and be the first one to completely cover it, or save his crew. He saved his crew.
Yeah.
Okay. Every time that I fire up our mower and go put hay into a windrow, I'm actually moving us further away from our vision. Okay. Because our vision is actually about adapted livestock and healthy ecosystems. Now, I don't think that we're going backwards in that this ecosystems become unhealthy. When I go through the 6 soil health principles and the 5 grazing principles, my mower actually passes every test, right? Even the minimized soil disturbance, because every time that we have a biological disturbance, that counts as a disturbance, but I've still minimized it. In my mind, I can be challenged. But our vision is that everything is adapted and I don't know, adapted and ecologically sound, right? But I can't become so locked into that pure vision that I'm willing to starve, a cow, let alone my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say don't be a zealot either, right?
Yeah.
You got to do what it takes to make things work. And another thing with one of the downfalls of our influencer culture is that we think everything they put on Instagram is exactly the way it is always in their life when they're making decisions about what they post too, right? They're not sharing their losses and their failures necessarily.
Yeah.
And then we also think, I can be there tomorrow, right? Whereas no, there's a process that we're working through and we've got this 10, 15, 20-year goal, but there's today and tomorrow between here and there, and how do we get there? And we make decisions today and tomorrow that are going to get us closer, but they're also going to make sure everything stays together all in one piece here, right? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
And I think just to add to that, with the culture that we live in now, there's a strong paradigm around building brands. And that paradigm is something to the fact that if you want to build a brand, you have to polarize. You have to have the 20% love you and the 80% hate you if you want to build a brand. And then you have to stay on message. If you ever, sway, if you ever look at a situation 2 different ways, you lose customers. I don't know if that paradigm is accurate or not. But that's how you build a brand. That's why Dave Ramsey says that debt is always bad. And you and I both know that if you develop the cure for cancer, please do not wait until you can, do that debt free and share it with the world, right? Let's just go ahead and go borrow the money and get it out there for the masses. And so it's never black and white, but either we've all subscribed to this paradigm that you have to always stay on the same topic, or it is a true paradigm that we really need to overcome, because there is always two sides to a coin.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Well, anything else that you want to add? We've kind of covered a lot of ground here today. No pun intended. I probably shouldn't say that every time I say we've covered a lot of ground here today, but I always feel obligated to. Anything else that you want to add to this conversation, or something you think needs said?
Oh man, I wish I had something really a huge compliment for Dallas that I could mask in the form of a dig, and I just don't have anything like that. So I guess I'm just gonna have to go back to my old standard. My grandpa told my dad when he quit school, never stop learning. And my dad told me when I got out of the University of Wyoming, never stop learning. And so I think that's the only thing that I can add to this, Clay, is never stop learning.
Very good. Well, Shanon, thank you for your time today.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. This has been fun.
Very good. Appreciate it. Very good stuff there. Always appreciate Shanon and his perspective. Looking forward to next week on the Working Cows podcast. We will be talking to Dr. Tom Roscoes, and we're going to talk to him about herd health and the ways that sea salt and other things fit into that overall herd health strategy. So very much looking forward to that conversation, and it will be coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.